Hey Guy, and tonight we will travel back in time. Not as a casual observer, but as a participant. You are standing on the deck of a small, weather-beaten boat, the Asian sun beating down on your neck. The year is 1900. The air smells of salt, tar, and anxious sweat. Below you, somewhere in the deep blue, lies a treasure that will rewrite history. It's a world of hand-cranked air pumps, heavy brass helmets, and a terrifyingly thin rubber hose that is your only connection to the world of the living. Let's be honest, in this scenario, you're probably not going to survive this. The crushing pressure, the nitrogen bubbling in your blood, the sheer, disorienting darkness of the deep. It's a miracle anyone ever did. But the lure of riches, of history, waiting to be found, is stronger than fear. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually like what we do here. For those of you already settled in, go ahead and post where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see our little community of night owls spread across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for some gentle, low-frequency background noise, and let's settle in for tonight's journey. The deck of the Euterpe pitches and rolls with the gentle swell of the sea. You are Elias Stadiatis, a sponge diver from the Greek island of Symi. This isn't your usual patch of water. A fierce storm blew your small fleet off course, forcing you to take shelter near the remote, rocky island of Antikythera. It's an unforgiving place, a jagged piece of limestone and scrub brush caught between Crete and the Peloponnese. But now the storm has passed, and the water is a clear, inviting turquoise. Captain Dimitrios Kontos has given the order. You might as well see if there are any sponges down there. Sponges are your livelihood, the soft, porous skeletons of sea creatures that ladies in Athens and Paris use for their baths. You pull on the thick, heavy canvas suit. It's stiff and smells of mildew and old seawater. Your crewmates help you lower the massive, gleaming brass helmet over your head, the heavy glass porthole staring out like a single cyclops eye. They bolt it to the collar ring, and suddenly the world goes quiet, replaced by the sound of your own breathing, unnaturally loud in the confinement. You waddle to the edge of the boat, lead weights strapped to your chest and back, lead-soled boots making you feel like a statue about to be pushed into the sea. Which is, essentially, what's about to happen. A crewmate gives you a thumbs up through your faceplate, and you step off the edge. The splash is cold, a shock that quickly subsides as you begin your descent. You are not swimming, you are falling in slow motion. The world of sunlight and air fades to a blue-green twilight. The only sounds are the rhythmic hiss-thump of the air pump on the deck above, feeding life down the rubber hose, and the gurgle of your exhaled breath escaping the helmet's valve. 45 meters. That's the target depth. It's a dangerous dive, pushing the limits of what a human body can endure without modern equipment. Historians still argue about the exact conditions and equipment used by these pioneering divers, but all agreed it was monumentally risky. The bends, or decompression sickness, was a constant, mysterious threat, a terrifying affliction they called sponge diver's disease, which could cripple or kill. You pass through shimmering clouds of tiny fish. The water gets darker, the blue deepening to an inky indigo. Your feet touch down on the seabed with a soft poof of sand. You're in a strange, alien landscape of rock and sparse seagrass. You begin your search, shuffling along, your lifeline trailing behind you like a clumsy tail. The pressure here is immense, a constant, heavy weight on your entire body. After a few minutes of finding nothing but rock and sand, you see something out of place. It's not a sponge. It's white, and it looks like a hand. A human hand, pale and mottled, reaching up from the seabed. Your heart hammers against your ribs. A body, a drowned sailor. You cautiously step closer, your leaden boots crunching on the gravelly sand. You reach out a gloved hand and touch it. It's cold and hard as stone. Marble, it's a statue. As your eyes adjust, you see more. The arm it's attached to, a torso, the serene face of a youth half buried in the sand. Then you see more shapes, dark and looming in the gloom. The unmistakable curve of amphorae, the large clay jars used for shipping wine and oil. And then, the biggest shape of all, the ghostly outline of a ship's hull, its wooden ribs picked clean by time and sea creatures, leaving a debris field of its lost cargo. You've stumbled upon a graveyard, not of men, but of treasure. A Roman ship, laden with Greek art, lost to the waves 2,000 years ago. You tug frantically on your line, a signal to be pulled up. You have to tell the captain. You've found something that will make you all rich. A little-known fact is that many of these early sponge divers believed sea sprites and other monsters guarded such wrecks, and any hesitation could mean death. It's a wonder you didn't just turn and run, thinking you disturbed a watery tomb. You probably should have. It would have been safer than getting involved with what comes next. You burst through the surface, sputtering and gasping, as your crewmates haul you over the side of the boat and unbolt your helmet. The sudden sunlight is blinding, the air fresh and sweet. You shout, words tumbling over each other, about the statues, the rotting horses, the piles of treasure. Captain Contos, a practical man with a weathered face, listens intently. At first, he's skeptical. Divers are known for their tall tailies, and the pressure can play tricks on the mind. A joke on ships like this was that a diver who saw a mermaid had probably just been sniffing too much of his own pumped air. But your earnestness, your sheer, wide-eyed terror and excitement convinces him. He decides to dive himself to verify your claim. When he surfaces an hour later, his face says it all. You haven't just found a few lost amphorae. You've found a time capsule from the age of Caesar. The recovery begins. It is a grueling, dangerous process that will stretch on for nearly a year. You and your fellow divers become the world's first underwater archaeologists, though you don't know it. You are simply treasure hunters. With ropes and nets, you begin the Herculean task of raising the finds from their 45-meter-deep resting place. The work is treacherous. A common historical fact is that this was the first major underwater archaeological excavation in history, setting a precedent for all that followed, even if its methods were crude by modern standards. The most spectacular find is a magnificent bronze statue, over life-sized, which will later be identified as the Antikythera philosopher. You loop ropes under its arms, and with the entire crew straining at the winch on deck, you slowly, carefully, hoist the 2,000-year-old figure from the deep. It emerges from the water, dripping and covered in marine concretions, a ghost of the classical world returning to the light. But the sea does not give up its treasures without a price. The work is marred by tragedy. One of your fellow divers, Georgos Kritikos, ascends too quickly after a deep dive and dies from the bends. 2 others are left permanently paralyzed, their bodies broken by the unyielding laws of pressure. It's a grim reminder of the knife's edge you walk every time you descend. An obscure fact is that the diver's only medical treatment for the bends was often to be resubmerged in a diving bell, a terrifying and usually ineffective folk remedy. It was a gamble with life and death every single day. Amidst the celebrated recovery of bronze and marble masterpieces, the beautiful heads of gods and heroes, the delicate glassware, the ornate furniture, you also bring up less glamorous objects. One of them is a rather unimpressive, corroded lump of bronze, about the size of a large book or a modern laptop. It's found amongst a pile of other debris, and no one pays it much mind. It's greenish-brown, calcified, and lumpy. It looks more like a rock than a piece of treasure. You and the others probably joked that it was a fossilized loaf of bread from the ship's galley, or maybe a discarded anchor weight. You haul it aboard with the rest of the salvage, another piece for the pile destined for the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. Historians still argue about the ship's specific route and cargo manifest. Was it a single massive shipment of loot from a newly conquered Greek city, being sent to a wealthy Roman patron in Italy? Or was it a merchant vessel that had collected its wares from various ports across the Aegean? The manifest, of course, is long lost, leaving scholars to piece together the story from the objects themselves. The ship, a massive Roman nobis honoraria, or cargo vessel, was a testament to the scale of commerce in the 1st century BCE. It was likely over 30 meters long, carrying hundreds of tons of luxury goods. The collection of statues represents one of the largest caches of Greek originals ever found. Most of what we know as Greek sculpture are actually Roman marble copies. These were the priceless bronze originals. And yet, sitting in a crate, overlooked and unappreciated, is that green, rocky lump. While the newspapers and the public go wild over the Antikythera youth and the other stunning sculptures, the lump is relegated to a storage room in the museum. A puzzle for another day. It is, by all accounts, the ugly duckling of the discovery. No one could possibly guess that this single, homely artifact would prove to be infinitely more valuable and more mysterious than all the beautiful statues combined. It sits in the dark, holding its secrets, waiting. You are now in Athens, a few years after the discovery. The year is 1902. The salt is washed from your skin, but the memory of the deep is still fresh. The treasures from the wreck are the talk of the town, housed in the grand halls of the National Archaeological Museum. You walk through the galleries, seeing the statues you helped raise, now cleaned and mounted on pedestals. They are magnificent, drawing crowds of academics, artists, and dignitaries from across Europe. You feel a swell of pride, mixed with the quiet grief for the men who were lost, bringing these wonders to light. In a dusty, cluttered storeroom, far from the public eye, sits the lump. It's been catalogued, given an inventory number, and mostly forgotten. It's just one of hundreds of miscellaneous metal fragments from the wreck. To the curators, the real value lies in the art, the things that are easily understood and appreciated. A bronze statue of a hero is self-explanatory. A corroded hunk of metal is not. One spring day, the Minister of Education and Religious Affairs, a man named Spyridon Sty, is visiting the museum. He's also an archaeologist and has taken a personal interest in the Antikythera finds. While the main curators are showing him the prized statues, he wanders into the storage area where the lesser artifacts are being sorted. His eyes land on the lump. Perhaps he sees something others missed, a hint of regularity in its shape beneath the calcified layers. He picks it up. It's surprisingly heavy. As he turns it over in his hands, examining the lumpy surface, a piece of the outer, rock-like casing cracks and falls away. And in that moment, history pivots. Peeking out from the fresh break in the corroded bronze is not more corrosion, not solid metal, but something impossible. A gear, a small, perfectly formed bronze gear wheel with triangular teeth, like something you'd find inside a modern clock. Stay stares at it, completely bewildered. Everyone in the room freezes. A gear? From a shipwreck that is demonstrably 2,000 years old? It makes no sense. The prevailing historical wisdom, a common fact of the era, was that the ancient Greeks, for all their genius in philosophy, geometry, and art, were not particularly advanced in complex mechanics. They had basic levers and pulleys, of course, but precision-tooled. Interlocking gears were thought to be an invention of the late Middle Ages, over 1,000 years later. To find such a thing in a 1st century BCE context was like finding a smartphone at the Battle of Hastings. It was an anachronism, a complete violation of the accepted timeline of technology. The initial reaction was disbelief, followed by frantic speculation. Some immediately declared it a fake, something that must have fallen onto the wreck site from a modern ship. But it was fused into the concretion, clearly as old as the statues. A more imaginative theory was that it was a part of some unknown, complex navigational tool, perhaps a sort of primitive astrolabe. A less imaginative joke among the museum staff was that it was just part of the ship's winch mechanism, even though the delicate teeth looked nothing like the cogs on a heavy-duty anchor winch. An obscure tidbit from this period is that the artifact was so baffling it was largely re-ignored for a time, even after Stace's discovery. The academic world simply didn't have a framework to understand it. It was an outlier, and science often dislikes outliers. The artifact was put back on its shelf, the small, exposed gear a silent rebuke to the neat and tidy story of history everyone had agreed upon. Historians still argue about the immediate impact of Stace's observation. Some accounts portray it as a eureka moment that instantly sparked serious inquiry, while others suggest it was a 9-day wonder that was quickly dismissed and filed away, its true significance not appreciated for decades. The truth is likely somewhere in between. It planted a seed of profound mystery, a question that would lie dormant, waiting for the right mind to come along and dedicate itself to the puzzle. The lump was no longer just a lump. It was now the Antikythera Mechanism, a name that hinted at its mechanical nature, but did little to explain its purpose. The statues in the main hall continued to draw the crowds, but in the back room, a revolution in the understanding of the ancient world had just begun, cracked open by a curious politician on a spring afternoon. Decades pass. The world is racked by 2 world wars and immense social change. You are no longer a diver, but a part of history itself. In the quiet halls of academia, the mystery of the Antikythera Mechanism deepens. The lump, which had broken into 3 main pieces and dozens of smaller fragments, remains an enigma. Early researchers had done what they could, carefully cleaning away some of the concretion and revealing more gears, dials, and faint inscriptions. But the technology to truly understand didn't exist yet. It was like trying to repair a Swiss watch with a hammer and chisel. The fragments were brittle, the layers of metal and text fused together by 2 millennia under the sea. Any attempt to physically separate the components would surely destroy them. The mechanism was locked in a prison of its own corrosion. Enter Derek de Solla Price. You are now looking through his eyes. It is the late 1950s. You are a British historian of science and a professor at Yale University, a man with a brilliant, eclectic mind and a passion for ancient technology. You first encounter the mechanism's fragments at the museum in Athens, and it's love at first sight. While others saw a confusing jumble of broken bronze, you see a magnificent ordered system. You see a question that demands an answer. You decide to dedicate the next 20 years of your life to cracking its code. It becomes your magnificent obsession. Your colleagues think you're a bit mad. Why waste a promising academic career on a single, bizarre artifact that is probably just a weird kind of astrolabe? They jokingly call you the Lord of the Lump, a title you probably wear with a perverse sense of pride. You begin a painstaking process of examination, working with Greek archaeologists like George Stamaeus. Your first major task is to try and decipher the inscriptions. Faintly visible on the surfaces of the fragments are lines of tiny, tightly packed Greek letters, many no more than 1 millimeter high. A common historical fact is that our understanding of the ancient world is built upon such inscriptions, found on everything from monumental temples to simple pottery shards. But these are different. They are part of a machine. Using powerful microscopes and clever lighting techniques, you and your collaborators begin the slow, arduous work of transcription. It's like reading a ghost's handwriting. An obscure fact is that the total amount of text on the mechanism is estimated to be around 20,000 characters, forming what is essentially a detailed user manual for the device. It's an unprecedented treasure trove of ancient scientific Greek. You trace the faint outlines of words like Helios, Selene, and the names of the zodiacal constellations. This confirms your suspicion. The device is astronomical in nature, but the text is just one part of the puzzle. The real magic is in the gears. You realize you need to see inside the fragments to map the entire gear train without taking it apart. In a groundbreaking move for archaeology, you persuade the Greek authorities to let you use X-rays. In 1971, you and a team from the Greek Atomic Energy Commission subject the delicate fragments to radiation. The first results are promising but blurry. The bronze is dense, and the technology of the day struggles to penetrate it effectively. So you move on to more powerful gamma rays, emitted from a radioactive source. The resulting images are a revelation. Layer by layer, the internal structure of the mechanism is revealed. It's not just a few gears. It's a breathtakingly complex system of at least 30, and likely more, precisely interlocking gear wheels. You can see how they are arranged, how they connect, how one turns another in a complex, predetermined dance. Historians still argue whether Price's initial interpretation of the gear trains was entirely correct, as later imaging would refine his models, but his foundational work laid the groundwork for everything that followed. You feel a thrill of discovery that rivals that of the original divers. You are the first human in 2,000 years to understand what you are looking at. It is, you declare in a landmark 1974 paper for Scientific American, a mechanical computer. A clockwork cosmos from ancient Greece, designed to model the movements of the heavens. The world of history is about to be turned on its head, all because you refuse to believe it was just a strange lump of bronze. You've given the ugly duckling a new name, the world's first analog computer. You are standing in a modern imaging lab, surrounded by computer monitors that glow in the dim light. The year is now the early 2000s. The torch passed by Derek DeSala Price has been taken up by a new generation of researchers, armed with technology he could only have dreamed of. You are part of the Antikythera Mechanism research project, a collaboration of scientists from Greece, the UK, and the United States. The precious fragments, now designated Fragment A, B, C, and so on, are housed in a specially designed case. Your goal is to create a complete, three-dimensional digital model of the entire device. To do this, you're not just using a simple X-ray machine. You are using a custom-built 8-ton behemoth called the Bladder Runner, a micro-focus computed tomography scanner. It's a bit like a medical CT scanner, but thousands of times more powerful, designed to peer through solid rock and metal. A joke among the team is that if you stood in its beam for too long, you'd come out with your DNA sequenced and a nice suntan on your skeleton. The scanner slowly rotates around the fragments, taking thousands of high-resolution cross-sectional images. These digital slices are then fed into a supercomputer, which stacks them together to build a virtual 3D model. For the first time, you can fly through the mechanism. You can peel away layers of corrosion with the click of a mouse, isolate individual gears, and watch how they mesh together. The level of detail is astounding. You can count the individual teeth on gears that are still buried deep within the matrix of bronze. You discover gears that Price never knew existed, hidden in the most compressed and damaged sections. The digital model confirms that the mechanism had at least 37 gear wheels, though the final count could be higher as some are still missing. The common historical fact is that this kind of non-destructive analysis has revolutionized heritage science, allowing us to study fragile artifacts without ever touching them. But the CT scanner reveals more than just the mechanical structure. It also helps to read the inscriptions with unprecedented clarity. Buried under layers of corrosion, the faint etchings of Greek letters show up in the 3D data. Combined with another advanced technique called polynomial texture mapping, which uses a dome of 50 light sources to capture every minute detail of a surface. You can read text that has been invisible to the human eye for 2 millennia. An obscure fact discovered through this process is that the inscriptions were not made by a single person. Analysis of the letter forms suggests at least 2 different scribes contributed to the user manual, perhaps a master craftsman and his apprentice. This small detail brings a human touch to this object of high science. It wasn't built by a god, it was built by people. The front face of the mechanism is the most visually striking. The digital reconstruction shows a large central dial with 2 concentric rings. The outer ring is marked with the 365 days of the Egyptian solar calendar, which the Greeks used for astronomical calculations because it was simple and didn't have leap years. A joke at the time was that the Egyptian calendar was the only thing more regular and predictable than a Roman tax collector. The inner ring is marked with the 12 signs of the zodiac, delineated by degrees. A single long pointer would have indicated the date, but it was much more than that. Other, smaller pointers, now lost, would have moved around this dial as well. One showed the position of the sun, another the position of the moon. A small secondary sphere, half silvered and half black, was attached to the moon pointer and rotated to show the lunar phases. New moon, first quarter, full moon, last quarter. Historians still argue about the exact mechanism that drove this phase-displaying sphere, as the gearing for it is particularly complex and located in a heavily damaged part of the device. Just by turning a single hand crank on the side, you could watch the sun and moon dance across the sky, their paths perfectly replicated in miniature on the face of this bronze box. It was an elegant, dynamic model of the cosmos as the Greeks understood it. A teacher's tool and a scientist's calculator all in one. And this was just the front. The real complexity, you discover, is hidden on the back. Now you turn your attention to the back of the device. If the front was an elegant display, the back is the engine room, a testament to the sheer computational power of this ancient machine. Your digital model reveals 2 large, spiral-shaped dials that dominate the backplate. These are not simple circles. They are beautiful, flowing spirals, like the shell of a nautilus. This ingenious design allowed the creators to pack an immense amount of information into a limited space. It's a brilliant piece of data compression, ancient Greek style. You can almost imagine the designer having a eureka moment, realizing a spiral could fit a 235-month calendar onto a small bronze plate. It's the kind of clever hack a modern software engineer would appreciate. The upper spiral dial is a calendar. But it's not just any calendar. It is a 19-year cycle known as the Metonic cycle. A common historical fact is that ancient calendars were a nightmare of complexity. Most, like the Greek civic calendars, were based on the moon's cycles, with months of 29 or 30 days. This resulted in a year that was about 11 days shorter than the solar year, the time it takes Earth to go around the sun. This meant that over time, the months would drift out of sync with the seasons. Summer festivals would end up happening in the middle of winter. To fix this, they had to periodically insert an extra intercalary month. The Metonic cycle, named after the 5th century BCE Athenian astronomer Meton, was a brilliant solution. It calculated that 235 lunar months almost perfectly equals 19 solar years. The dial on the mechanism tracks this 19-year, 235-month cycle, and even shows which months were the intercalary ones that needed to be added to keep the calendar aligned with the seasons. A pointer would move along the spiral groove, a complete rotation taking 19 years dot, as if that wasn't enough. Nestled inside the Metonic dial is a smaller, subsidiary dial. This one tracks an even more obscure cycle, the Callippic cycle. This was a refinement of the Metonic cycle, proposed by the astronomer Callippus in the 4th century BCE. He grouped 4 Metonic cycles together, 76 years, and dropped one day to create an even more accurate alignment of the lunar and solar calendars. The fact that the mechanism's creator included this level of astronomical nuance is staggering. It's like buying a standard family car and finding out it has the engine of a Formula One racer. It's an almost obsessive level of precision. An obscure fact is that the names of the months inscribed on the Metonic dial are Corinthian in origin, which provides a major clue as to where the mechanism, or at least its designer, might have come from. The lower spiral dial is perhaps the most astonishing of all. This is the eclipse prediction dial, based on what is known as the Saros cycle. The Saros cycle is a period of approximately 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours, or 223 lunar months, that has been used since the time of the ancient Babylonians to predict eclipses of the sun and moon. Eclipses are not random. They occur in repeating patterns. The Saros dial tracks this cycle, and small glyphs or symbols inscribed on the dial indicate when an eclipse is predicted, specifying whether it is solar, S for Selene, the moon, obscuring Helios, the sun, or lunar, H for Helios's shadow obscuring Selene. It even seems to have included information about the expected time of day for the eclipse. Historians still argue whether the mechanism could predict the location on Earth from which a solar eclipse would be visible, as this requires knowledge of longitude, which was notoriously difficult for the ancients to calculate. The mechanism might have simply indicated that an eclipse was possible somewhere in the world on that date. Even so, to have a portable, mechanical device that could predict these terrifying and awe-inspiring celestial events was an incredible feat. Imagine owning this in a superstitious age. You wouldn't just be a scholar. You would seem like a magician, a person who could foretell the moments when the sun would go dark or the moon would turn blood red. It would be the ultimate party trick, assuming your parties involved a lot of nervous discussions about the wrath of the gods. Your journey into the mechanism's functions takes another surprising turn. It wasn't just a cold scientific calculator for lonely astronomers. It was also deeply connected to the social and cultural life of the Greek world. Buried in the data, from the back dials, your research team discovers another, smaller subsidiary dial, located within the lower Saros spiral. It doesn't track planets or eclipses. It tracks people. Specifically, it tracks the cycle of the great Pan-Hellenic Games. This is the Olympiad dial. A common historical fact is that the Olympic Games, held every 4 years in honor of Zeus at Olympia, were the most important and prestigious of these festivals. They were so central to Greek identity that time itself was often measured in Olympiads, the 4-year periods between games. But the Olympics weren't the only major games. The dial on the mechanism shows a 4-year cycle, and in each year, it names the locations of the 2 most significant games of that year. For year 1, it lists Isthmia and Olympia. The Isthmian Games were held at Corinth. For year 2, it lists Nemea and Na, a festival at Dodona, though this is debated. Year 3, Isthmia and Pythia. The Pythian Games were held at Delphi in honor of Apollo. And for year 4, it lists Nemea again. This little dial was a complete sporting calendar for the ancient elite dot. This discovery is a game changer. It transforms the mechanism from a purely astronomical device into something much more personal and practical. You can imagine a wealthy Greek merchant or a traveling diplomat using it. He could turn the crank to a future date to see not only the phase of the moon for his sea voyage, but also to check if he needed to make travel arrangements for the upcoming Nemean Games. It's a bit like having a high-tech celestial calendar that also has your Google Sports calendar integrated into it. A modern parallel might be a multi-million-dollar atomic clock that also happens to display the dates for the World Cup and the Super Bowl. It's a delightful and very human feature. This cultural dimension provides more clues about the object's origin. The inclusion of the Isthmian Games, held at Corinth, along with the Corinthian-style month names on the Metonic calendar, strengthens the theory that the mechanism has a strong connection to Corinth, or one of its colonies in northwestern Greece. An obscure fact related to this is that some scholars believe the Na James mentioned on the dial, held at the ancient oracle of Dodona, suggest a link to the region of Epirus, as this was their most significant local festival. Historians still argue over the precise identity and significance of the NAA Games, as it was a less universally famous event than the other four. This debate highlights the regional flavor of the device. It wasn't just for all Greeks, but was likely built by someone with specific local allegiances. The presence of the games dial also subtly changes your perception of the device's purpose. It wasn't hidden away in a scholar's dusty study. This was an object to be displayed, to be used, perhaps even to show off. It was a status symbol, a demonstration of both wealth and intellect. Owning it meant you were sophisticated enough to appreciate the intricate dance of the cosmos and worldly enough to keep track of the most important social events on the calendar. It connects the heavens to the earth, the cycles of the planets to the cycles of human competition and celebration. It's a profoundly Greek way of looking at the world, a belief in a rational, ordered cosmos where the movements of the stars and the gatherings of people are all part of the same grand, cyclical design. The little gear that drives the Olympiad pointer is a testament to the idea that science, culture, and daily life were not separate categories in the ancient mind, but were all interwoven in a beautiful, complex tapestry. And you're seeing it all laid out in a language of bronze gears. The sun, the moon, the calendars, the games, these are all monumental discoveries. But the mechanism holds one more secret, a secret so profound that it pushes the boundaries of what anyone thought was possible for ancient technology. For decades, researchers suspected that the mechanism might have tracked the planets, but the evidence was missing. The 5 planets visible to the naked eye: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn move in complex and seemingly erratic ways. They wander against the background of fixed stars, which is why the Greeks called them planets, meaning wanderers. The most difficult motion to explain and replicate mechanically is retrograde motion, where a planet appears to temporarily reverse its course in the sky before resuming its forward path. For a geocentric, Earth-centered model of the universe, which the Greeks used, explaining this required some very fancy mathematical footwork, involving concepts called epicycles and reference essentially wheels turning on other wheels. You and your team re-examined the CT scans and the high-resolution surface imaging, looking for any hint of this planetary function. Derek de Solla Price had theorized that the planets were displayed on the front dial, but he couldn't find the gearing for it. The breakthrough comes from a combination of reinterpreting the faint inscriptions on the back door of the device and a painstaking reanalysis of the gear fragments. The inscriptions, what you can read of them, describe the synodic cycles of the planets, the time it takes for a planet to return to the same position in the sky relative to the sun, as seen from Earth. For example, the text gives a value of 462 years for Venus and 442 years for Saturn, incredibly accurate values for the period. This textual evidence proves the intention to model the planets. But where was the hardware? The key lies in understanding the complex, layered structure of the gear trains. The digital model allows you to explode the view, separating the gears in virtual space to see how they would have fit together. You discover an incredibly sophisticated system of gears, likely stacked one on top of the other in the center of the machine. This system used what is known as a pin and slot mechanism. This is the crucial innovation that allowed the creator to model the variable speed and retrograde motion of the planets. A common historical fact is that Leonardo da Vinci sketched a similar pin and slot device in his notebooks in the late 15th century, and it was long considered a product of the Renaissance mind. Finding it here, 1,600 years earlier, is mind-blowing. It works by having one gear with a pin that moves inside a slot on another gear. As the pin moves closer to, or farther from the center of the slotted gear, it causes the slotted gear to speed up or slow down, perfectly mimicking the apparent variations in a planet's motion dot. It's a solution of such staggering elegance and mathematical insight that it leaves you breathless. To calculate the correct gear ratios and the precise shape of the slots, to model the orbits of all 5 planets from an Earth-centered perspective is a feat of genius. Historians still argue whether this planetary system was fully implemented on the surviving artifact, or if the fragments we have from a model that only included some of the planets. The gearing for Mars, in particular, with its dramatic retrograde loop, would have been exceptionally complex. An obscure fact is that some of the gear tooth counts seem to be prime numbers, like 19, 53, or 223. This is a deliberate choice by the designer. Using prime numbers in gear trains is an advanced technique to create very long, accurate cycles, preventing patterns from repeating too quickly. It's not the kind of thing you stumble upon by accident. It's the work of a master mathematician and engineer. You can almost picture the designer, hunched over a papyrus scroll, working through the geometry, a silent Greek genius whose name is lost to history. The mechanism wasn't just a sun and moon calendar. It was a complete, portable planetarium, a miniature cosmos in a box. It modeled the entire universe as they knew it, from the date on the calendar to the majestic looping dance of the distant wanderers. It's a bit like finding out that the Wright brothers' first flyer not only flew for 12 seconds, but also had a fully functional GPS and an in-flight entertainment system. The technological leap is just that vast. So, who could have built such a thing? The question of authorship is one of the most tantalizing mysteries surrounding the mechanism. You have this object of almost unbelievable sophistication, yet there is no signature, no made by stamp on the back. To solve this mystery, you must become a detective, piecing together clues from history, geography, and the device itself. The evidence points you towards one particular island in the Aegean, the island of Rhodes in the 2nd and 1st centuries BCE. Rhodes was a major center of commerce, culture, and most importantly, science. It was home to a vibrant school of astronomers and philosophers. The strongest clue linking the mechanism to Rhodes comes from the writings of the great Roman orator and philosopher Cicero. In his work, De Republica, on the Republic, written in the middle of the 1st century BCE, Cicero describes seeing a remarkable mechanical sphere. He says it was built by Posidonius, a famous Stoic philosopher and scientist from Rhodes. This device, Cicero writes, could model the motions of the sun, the moon, and the 5 planets, showing their movements by day and night. The description is an almost perfect match for the capabilities of the Antikythera Mechanism. Cicero mentions another, similar device, an older one, built by the legendary mathematician and inventor Archimedes of Syracuse in the 3rd century BCE. According to the story, when the Romans sacked Syracuse in 212 BCE, the Roman general Marcellus was so impressed by Archimedes' sphere that he took it back to Rome as his only piece of loot, leaving the city's gold and silver behind. A common historical fact is that Archimedes was antiquity's greatest inventor, credited with discovering the principle of buoyancy, developing the Archimedes screw, and creating fearsome war machines. It seems perfectly plausible that he could have built a mechanical cosmos. Cicero states that Posidonius' sphere was a later, perhaps more advanced, version of Archimedes' original. This creates a tantalizing lineage of genius. From Archimedes in Syracuse to the thinkers of Rhodes. This leads you to another giant of Greek astronomy, Hipparchus. Hipparchus worked on Rhodes in the 2nd century BCE and is considered by many to be the greatest observational astronomer of the ancient world. He catalogued over 850 stars, calculated the length of the year to within 6.5 minutes, discovered the precession of the equinoxes, and developed the mathematical theories of epicycles and deference used to explain planetary motion. The specific astronomical cycles found in the mechanism, such as its highly accurate theory for the moon's variable motion, the so-called first anomaly, align perfectly with the known work of Hipparchus. The mechanism seems to be a physical manifestation of his mathematical theories. Historians still argue about the direct line of influence. Was it Hipparchus himself who designed it? Or was it a later craftsman from the school of Hipparchus? Perhaps Posidonius, who translated the master's theories into bronze. The timeline fits. Hipparchus was active around 140 to 120 BCE, and the ship is dated to have sunk around 70 to 60 BCE. This gives enough time for his ideas to be refined and built into a machine. An obscure fact that adds a layer to this mystery is that the Corinthian month names on the calendar dials don't necessarily mean it was built in Corinth. Syracuse, where Archimedes lived, was a Corinthian colony. It's possible that this calendar style was a tradition passed down through this lineage of inventors, from Syracuse to Rhodes. You imagine a workshop in Rhodes, smelling of hot metal and charcoal. A master craftsman, steeped in the astronomical knowledge of Hipparchus and the mechanical tradition of Archimedes, is painstakingly cutting the gear teeth with a file, testing the movements and consulting with scholars on the precise mathematical ratios. It's not the work of one person, but the culmination of a tradition. You might even joke that this was the ancient world's equivalent of a Silicon Valley startup, a Rhodes Labs, that specialized in cosmic devices. The mechanism wasn't a random fluke of genius. It was the product of a specific time, a specific place, and a specific intellectual heritage that we are only now beginning to fully appreciate. Let's return to the scene of the crime, the shipwreck itself. The mechanism is the star of the show, but it was not traveling alone. It was a passenger on a doomed voyage, and its fellow passengers, the other artifacts in the cargo hold, help to tell the rest of the story. You sift through the archaeological reports, the catalogs of finds, to reconstruct a picture of this ghost ship. The vessel was a colossal Roman merchant ship, a veritable treasure galleon of its day. Its size and the richness of its cargo suggest it was on a very important mission. The common historical fact here is that by the 1st century BCE, Rome had become the dominant power in the Mediterranean. Wealthy Roman elites developed a voracious appetite for Greek art and culture, and a massive trade emerged, shipping Greek masterpieces to villas in Rome and Pompeii. Many of these shipments were, essentially, loot from cities that had sided against Rome in various wars. The Antikythera ship's cargo was the very definition of luxury. Alongside the world-class bronze and marble statues, divers recovered pieces of ornate furniture with bronze fittings, dozens of intact, beautiful glass bowls and plates, and an astonishing amount of high-end pottery. There were also at least 36 marble statues, including representations of Hercules, Apollo, and Odysseus. The sheer volume and quality of the art has led some to believe this was not a standard merchant haul. One prominent theory is that it was the specific dowry for a royal wedding, or perhaps the entire collection of a Greek nobleman being relocated to Rome. Among the more mundane, but equally revealing, finds were the personal effects of the crew and passengers. Divers found gold jewelry, including rings and necklaces, as well as silver and bronze coins from various Greek city-states, primarily Pergamum and Ephesus. These coins are crucial for dating the wreck. The latest minted coins found were from between 76 and 67 BCE, which means the ship must have sunk sometime after that, likely around 65 BCE. An obscure fact is that analysis of lead recovered from the ship's hull showed it was mined in the region near Pergamum. providing another geographical clue to the ship's journey. It seems to have been traveling from the coast of Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, island hopping across the Aegean, and was likely headed for a major Italian port, perhaps Puteoli or even Rome itself, when disaster struck. So what happened? Why did this magnificent ship, laden with a fortune in art and technology, end up at the bottom of the sea? The location provides the answer. The island of Antikythera is a notorious shipping hazard. It lies directly in the path of a major east-west trade route, and the channel is known for its sudden, violent storms and treacherous currents. You can imagine the scene. The ship, heavy in the water, is caught in a ferocious gale. Mountainous waves crash over the deck, the wind shrieking through the rigging. The terrified crew fights to keep the vessel under control, but the rudder is useless against the storm's fury. The captain is trying to steer for the shelter of the island, but he misjudges the currents or is driven by the wind. The ship is smashed against the island's unforgiving cliffs. The sound of splintering timber is deafening. The hull is breached, and cold seawater floods the hold, mingling with fine Greek wine from the amphorae and swirling around the feet of bronze gods. The ship sinks quickly, taking its crew, its passengers, and its priceless cargo down into the dark. Historians still argue about the human toll of the wreck. While 4 partial skeletons have been recovered from the site in recent years, a man, a woman, and 2 adolescents, the total number of people aboard is unknown. A ship this size would have had a crew of at least a dozen, and likely several wealthy passengers as well. The discovery of the human remains adds a layer of poignant tragedy to the story. You can see one of them in your mind's eye, perhaps a young scribe or scholar tasked with looking after the mechanism, clutching the wooden box that held it as the ship went down, his own life ending at the same moment the device's 2,000-year slumber began. It's a somber reminder that behind this story of lost tech and found treasure is a very human story of catastrophe and loss. Let's zoom out from the shipwreck and consider the world that produced it. The Hellenistic period, the era between the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC and the rise of the Roman Empire, was not a dark age. It was a vibrant, innovative, and incredibly sophisticated time. You are walking through the streets of a great Hellenistic city like Alexandria, Pergamum, or Rhodes. It's a bustling, cosmopolitan metropolis. The air is filled with the sounds of a dozen different languages, the smell of exotic spices from the east, and fresh bread from the local bakeries. You see magnificent public buildings, libraries, theaters, and gymnasia. It's a world of science, philosophy, and engineering. It's easy to forget that this was the world of Euclid, the father of geometry, Eratosthenes, who calculated the circumference of the earth with stunning accuracy, and Casibius, who invented the water clock and the hydraulic organ. A common historical fact is that the Library of Alexandria was the single greatest repository of knowledge in the ancient world, containing hundreds of thousands of scrolls on every subject imaginable. The Antikythera Mechanism was not born in a vacuum. It was the product of this specific, highly advanced scientific culture. The mathematics required to design it, advanced geometry and trigonometry, was well established. The astronomical theories it embodied were the cutting edge of their day. The fine metalworking skills needed to build it were also present, honed in the creation of scientific instruments, automata, and luxury goods. We have ancient texts that describe all sorts of wondrous mechanical devices. Besides Cicero's account of the spheres of Archimedes and Posidonius, we have stories of automated theaters with moving puppets, steam-powered toys, and intricate water clocks with ringing bells and moving figures. One of the more delightful and obscure facts comes from the writings of Hero of Alexandria, an engineer from the 1st century CE. He describes, among other things, a vending machine that dispensed holy water when a coin was inserted, and an early steam engine called an AEOL, IPILE. So, if the ancients had this level of technology, the big question is, why didn't they have an industrial revolution? Why didn't this clockwork technology lead to factories, steam trains, and all the other hallmarks of the modern age? It's a massive question, and historians still argue passionately about the answer. There are many competing theories. One popular argument is a societal one. The Greco-Roman world was built on slave labor. With a vast, cheap source of manual power, there was little economic incentive to develop labor-saving machinery on a large scale. Why build a complex mechanical loom when you have slaves to do the weaving? Technology was often seen as a pursuit for intellectuals or a way to create impressive toys for the rich, not as a tool for mass production. It was a thinking man's game, not a working man's tool. A joke you might make is that they had the geniuses to invent the steam engine, but they would have just used it to make a fancy singing statue for a rich man's garden, not to power a factory. Another theory focuses on a lack of key supplementary technologies. To get an industrial revolution, you need more than just gears. You need advanced metallurgy to produce high-quality, durable steel in large quantities. You need a sophisticated understanding of thermodynamics. You need a way to harness power on a massive scale. Perhaps most importantly, you need a system for disseminating knowledge, not just to other scholars, but to craftsmen and engineers. The Antikythera Mechanism was likely a bespoke, one-of-a-kind object, or one of only a handful. The knowledge of how to build it was probably a closely guarded secret, passed down from a master to a few apprentices. When that lineage was broken by a shipwreck or a war, or a simple lack of interest from the next generation, the knowledge was lost. It wasn't printed in textbooks and distributed to engineering schools. So the technology existed, but it was fragile, an isolated peak of brilliance rather than a broad foundation for future progress. The mechanism isn't evidence of a lost industrial age, but of a different path technology could have taken. One focused on precision, demonstration, and cosmic understanding rather than industrial might. The story of the mechanism isn't over. The wreck site, which lay dormant for decades after the initial excavations, has become a hotbed of new research. You are back in the water, but this time you're not in a heavy brass helmet. You are a modern archaeologist, part of a 21st century expedition. You might be piloting a remote-operated vehicle, ROV. Its high-definition cameras, beaming images back to the ship. Or you might be diving yourself, wearing a sleek modern wetsuit and using a rebreather that produces no bubbles, allowing you to get closer to the delicate artifacts without disturbing the sediment. The centerpiece of the new exploration is the exosuit, a revolutionary one-atmosphere submersible that looks like something out of a science fiction movie. It allows a diver to descend to incredible depths and work for hours without facing the dangers of pressure and decompression. It's a piece of high-tech gear exploring a piece of high-tech history, a fitting technological echo across the millennia. The new dives, which began in earnest in 2012 under the Return to Antikythera project, have yielded a treasure trove of new information. The team has been systematically excavating the site, using advanced 3D mapping techniques to record the precise location of every single find. This has allowed them to understand the wreck's layout and how it broke apart as it sank. A common historical fact is that modern archaeology is less about finding treasure and more about gathering data. The context of an artifact is just as important as the artifact itself. By mapping the debris field, researchers can reconstruct how the cargo was stored and how the ship was organized. The new discoveries have been spectacular. They have found more pieces of the massive bronze statues, including a missing arm, and other fragments. They have recovered beautiful red slip tableware, an intact bone flute, And even a bronze ring so delicate, it's a miracle it survived. But perhaps the most exciting find came in 2016. Tucked away under a rock, the team discovered a human skeleton, remarkably well preserved. It was nicknamed Pamphilos, after a name found on a wine cup at the site. DNA analysis was even possible, a first for a victim of an ancient shipwreck, though results were inconclusive. Since then, at least 3 more partial skeletons have been found. This is a crucial discovery, a direct physical link to the people who died in the disaster. It reminds you that this isn't just an intellectual puzzle. It's a human tragedy. An obscure but fascinating find from the recent dives is a small, disc-shaped bronze object. When it was first brought up, some on the team joked that they had found another one, another mechanism, while it turned out not to be another geared device. Analysis showed it might be a protective cover for one of the dials, or perhaps part of another, simpler instrument. The team has even recovered pieces of the ship's wood, allowing for more precise analysis of its construction. Historians still argue about the exact origin of the ship's timbers, which could help pinpoint where it was built. Every new piece of wood, every pottery shard, every bone fragment adds a new pixel to the picture. One of the most tantalizing prospects is that there are still undiscovered fragments of the Antikythera mechanism itself buried in the sediment. The original device was found in a small area, but the ship was huge, and the wreck is spread out over a large debris field. Researchers believe that the missing gears, the planetary pointers, and other key components could still be down there, waiting to be found. Every dive carries the thrilling possibility of finding that one missing piece that will solve a long-standing puzzle about how the machine worked. The search continues, a slow, patient conversation with the deep, coaxing its secrets out one artifact at a time. The Antikythera Mechanism has been called the most important archaeological discovery of the 20th century. It single-handedly reset our understanding of ancient Greek technology. But it also presents a profound and slightly unsettling thought. If this existed, what else did they make? If this one object, preserved by the sheer luck of a catastrophic shipwreck, is so advanced, what about all the other devices that weren't so lucky? What about the ones that weren't lost at sea, but were simply melted down, fell apart, or rotted? Away on land? The mechanism is almost certainly not a unique object. As we saw from Cicero's writings, this type of device was known in his time. It was the product of a tradition. This means that for every Antikythera mechanism we have, there could have been dozens, maybe hundreds, of others that are now lost forever. You are now wandering through a phantom museum of lost technology. In your mind, you see the other inventions, described in ancient texts. You see Hero of Alexandria's steam-powered Eolipile, not as a mere toy, but perhaps as a prototype that, in another timeline, could have been scaled up. You see the water-powered organs of Ctesibius, and imagine them not just in theaters, but as part of complex, automated public clocks in the forums of great cities. You see the automated puppet shows, and imagine them as early experiments in robotics and programming. A common historical fact is that the vast majority of ancient bronze statues have been lost because bronze was too valuable. Whenever a city was conquered or an old monument fell out of fashion, the statues were melted down to make weapons, coins, or new statues. The same fate almost certainly befell countless complex machines. It's much easier to melt down a box of gears than a 2-ton marble statue. This is the great tragedy of lost knowledge. The mechanism is a single, brilliant data point in an otherwise empty graph. It hints at a world where mechanical engineering was far more advanced than we ever believed. It suggests that the Dark Ages that followed the fall of Rome were perhaps even darker than we thought. Not just a loss of political stability, but a catastrophic loss of technical know-how. The skills to create something like the mechanism were not rediscovered in Europe, for over 1,400 years, with the appearance of the great astronomical clocks in medieval cathedrals. It's a humbling thought. We tend to see history as a story of steady, linear progress, but the mechanism is proof that history can also move backward. That knowledge can be fragile and easily erased. Historians still argue about the extent of this lost technological world. Some believe the mechanism is an extreme outlier, a singular peak of genius that was not widely replicated. Others argue it's just the tip of the iceberg, a tantalizing glimpse of a world rich with mechanical wonders that have vanished from the archaeological record. An obscure but related field is the study of ancient automata, texts from across the ancient world, from Greece to China, describes seemingly magical self-moving statues and devices. While many were likely simple tricks involving strings or magnets, some descriptions hint at more complex clockwork or hydraulic systems. The Antikythera Mechanism provides the first hard evidence that the engineering skills to build such things actually existed. A joke among historians of technology is that if you went back in time to ancient Rhodes, you shouldn't be surprised to find a robotic butler serving you wine, though it would probably spill it on you. The truth is, we simply don't know. The mechanism is both a glorious answer and a profound question. It tells us what the Greeks could do, but it leaves us to wonder what else they did do. It is a ghost from a lost future, a reminder that the past is a foreign country, and many of its greatest monuments have long since turned to dust. So where is it now? You are back in the present day, in Athens. You walk up the wide marble steps of the National Archaeological Museum, the same museum where Spiridon Sties first saw the glint of a gear tooth over a century ago. You pass through the grand galleries filled with the other treasures from the wreck. There is the majestic Antikythera youth, his bronze skin glowing under the museum lights. There are the serene marble heads, the delicate glassware, and the other survivors of that ancient catastrophe. They are all stunning. But you are here to see the main event. In a specially designed, climate-controlled display case under soft lighting lie the fragments of the Antikythera Mechanism. They don't look like much at first glance. They are still just corroded, greenish lumps of bronze. Fragment A, the largest piece, is the most recognizable, with the clear outline of the main drive wheel visible. The other, smaller fragments are arranged around it, looking like pieces of a puzzle that can never be fully reassembled. It's hard to reconcile this mangled, fragile object with the clockwork cosmos you've explored in the digital models. But as you stare at it, you begin to appreciate its reality. This isn't a computer simulation. This is the thing itself. This is the bronze that was mined from the earth 2,000 years ago. This is the metal that was cut and shaped by the hands of a forgotten genius. This is the object that lay in the crushing darkness of the seabed while empires rose and fell above it. You feel a sense of awe, a connection across the centuries. Next to the original fragments, the museum displays several modern reconstructions. There are gleaming, fully functional models made of brass and plexiglass, created by researchers and expert craftsmen based on the latest scientific data. One model, built by a company called Hublot, looks like a luxury watch on steroids. A joke about just how much this kind of craftsmanship would cost today. These reconstructions allow you to see what the device would have looked like in its prime. You can turn a crank on the side and watch the pointers move. The gears whir. The sun and moon track across the zodiac, and the little sphere display the lunar phase. Seeing the reconstruction in action finally makes the complexity of the original. Fragments click into place. You can see the genius of the design, the economy of motion, the sheer elegance of the solution. A common historical fact presented in the exhibit is that no other object of similar complexity is known from the ancient world. It stands alone. The museum exhibit tells the whole story. The storm, the discovery by the sponge divers, the decades. of research, the cutting-edge science that unlocked its secrets. It's a story of human ingenuity, both ancient and modern. But as you stand there, you also reflect on the role of luck in history. What if that storm had not blown the sponge? Divers' boat off course? What if they had sought shelter at a different island? The wreck would still be down there, its secrets unknown. What if Spyridon's dice hadn't been in a curious mood that day in 1902 and hadn't picked up the lump? It might have languished in storage for another 50 years. The survival and rediscovery of the mechanism is a chain of improbable events. An obscure fact for museum visitors is that for many years, the fragments were stored in open boxes, and one curator even cleaned them with a wire brush, thankfully not destroying the crucial inscriptions. The object has survived not just a shipwreck, but also nearly a century of well-intentioned, but sometimes clumsy human handling. Historians still argue about the best way to preserve the fragments for the future, as they are incredibly fragile and susceptible to further corrosion. The debate is between total isolation in an inert gas environment versus the need for continued study. For now, it rests safely in its case, a silent testament to a lost world, its journey from the bottom of the sea to this hallowed hall finally complete. You take one last look at the fragments in their case. The journey is over. From the dark, crushing depths of the Aegean Sea to the bright, sterile light of this museum, you have followed this object through time. You have been a sponge diver, touching a ghost ship, a museum curator discovering a gear, a scientist peering into its soul with gamma rays, and a historian piecing together the world that created it. You have seen how this single, unassuming lump of bronze has forced us to redraw the map of history, to reconsider the technological capabilities of our ancestors. It is a story of a lost object, a lost ship, and a lost world of knowledge. Mechanism teaches us that the past is not as simple as we like to think. It's not a straight line of progress from primitive to advanced. It's a messy, complicated story with peaks of astounding brilliance and valleys of forgotten knowledge. It challenges our modern arrogance, our quiet assumption that we are the pinnacle of what it means to be human. The mind that conceived of the Antikythera Mechanism, that translated the complex mathematics of the heavens into a language of interlocking gears, was every bit as brilliant as any mind alive today. Person, that nameless genius from Rhodes, was our equal, separated from us only by the gulf of time. He or she also looked up at the night sky, at the same sun and moon and wandering planets, and felt the same sense of awe and the same desire to understand. The mechanism is more than just a piece of technology. It is a philosophical object. It represents a worldview, the Greek belief in a cosmos, an ordered, rational, and understandable universe. They believed that the same logic that governed geometry also governed the heavens, and that this logic could be replicated by human hands. The device is a profound statement of confidence in the power of the human mind to grasp the workings of the universe. And in a way, the story of its rediscovery is a similar testament. The international team of scientists, historians, and engineers who dedicated years to solving its puzzle were driven by that same impulse, to apply reason and ingenuity to unlock a secret. A joke that doesn't feel like a joke is that it took a 21st century supercomputer to fully understand a first century BCE computer. The legacy of the mechanism is this beautiful symmetry, a story of human curiosity connecting two distant ages. It is a dialogue across 2,000 years, spoken in the universal language of science and wonder. And the conversation is not over. There are still secrets buried in the mud off the coast of Antikythera, waiting for the next generation of explorers. And, as you stand there before that silent, sleeping machine, the sounds of the museum begin to fade away. The hum of the lights, the shuffling feet of other visitors, the distant traffic of modern Athens. It all recedes into a gentle quiet, The image of the corroded bronze begins to soften, its sharp edges blurring into the darkness behind your eyelids. You are no longer in a museum, no longer in the deep sea. You are simply here, in the comfort of your own space, warm and safe. The weight of history, the immensity of the cosmos, all of it becomes light, drifting away like motes of dust in a sunbeam. Let the intricate gears slow their turning in your mind, their clockwork motion becoming the slow, steady rhythm of your own breathing. The story is told. The journey is done. All that remains now is the quiet of the night and the silent, star-filled sky above, the very same sky that inspired a forgotten genius on a Greek island so very long ago. Let the darkness be a soft blanket, and let the gentle background hum be a lullaby, easing you now into a deep and peaceful rest.